recall that I recently took Moby, the Mobility Cadet, down to a national car test centre for a vehicle registration inspection. Now, I had to go back on another occasion to pay, so I decided to make that a little bit more efficient and travel down with George. And even though he wasn't due yet to go in for his national car test, which is the equivalent of the MOT, so that I'd know what job I needed to do well in advance of the actual ticket running out. George actually did extremely well, and there's just a slight brake imbalance in the back which I'll deal with, and the other thing was that the CV boots, these rubber boots here, were slightly frayed or cut, to use their terminology. I've had a bit of an inspection and all I can find is that they're a little bit worn and there is one tiny little hole. These are quite important because what they do is they transmit the rotational movement of the engine and the gearbox down the driveshaft and out to the wheels. And in a front wheel drive car like this, it's the CV joint, the constant velocity ball joint, that allows the energy to be, the rotational energy to go into the wheel, but also that the wheel can be steered so that the car has steering as well. There's a system of steel balls driven by a special joint inside in a casing that the balls can roll in, which allows this to take place. So you'll actually see a little bit of that when I have to take this boot off. The reason the boot is important is that it holds grease, which stops the balls from wearing. And I don't know if you've ever heard, you may have heard on occasion, a car that's turning tightly and you hear a tock 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 kind of a noise. Well, that's a sign of the wear in the joint, and that's usually caused by the boot fraying and the grease escaping, and then wear occurring inside, so slack comes into it and hence the noise. And after a while, those parts, when they become worn, become a bit more delicate when there's play and slack in it, and the shock and energy from the engine being transmitted to the road, especially when the car is turning, they can actually break and the car will eventually lose drive. But in George's case, the sound hasn't even occurred. I doubt that even much grease has escaped, because normally when they're gone, there'll be a lot of grease in around here. I've good experience with this, because when I used to play with these cars as a teenager inside in the fields, this was one of the first things that would go, because mud and stuff would rip the boot, the grease would get out, mud would get into it and everything, and pretty soon you'd be flying around and turning corners tight, and you hear a top 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 noise, and you do it one time too many, and the next thing, bang, and there'd be metal balls flown out of the thing all over the place, and the little cage that holds them in would be broken and fractured. One of the first things I learned to do, one of the first things I learned to fix on these cars, the joint itself can be replaced separate to the shaft, but that's quite expensive. It's about 60-70 euros. So in this case, we're replacing the rubber boot, which is about a fiver, and it's a preventative measure, saving a lot of money down the line. So we better get stuck in. First thing I have to do is to take off this split pin. So rather frustratingly, I've had to jack the car up because the wheel prevents you from pulling that split pin out. I'll pull the split pin out of this side, I'll do the other side at the same time, jacked it up in the middle. I'll put the wheels back on, put it back down, and then that'll give me, that'll hold the wheel in position while I loosen the main nut here on the end of the CV. So this is what I actually got from Mick's Garage, and I went for the whole kit, which was about €8 each, and then another little bit for shipping. So pretty much 20 euros will sort this out. And this gives you everything you need. There's the boot, there's even the clips, and a pack of grease. So everything will be nicely refreshed and good as new, really. That's not a split pin. That's just exactly why it's not a good idea, because it's just a bit of all metal. and it cracked from being bent over and back. I have the wheel back on the ground, the handbrake pulled. I'll just put a bit of penetrating fluid on that so that the threads are nice and clean. And that wasn't too bad. Hopefully the other side will be as easy. George is back up in the air and supported. The next thing I'm going to have to do, so that I can pull this whole strut off the drive shaft and the CV joint, I need to release the lower ball joint. And the first thing I need to do is pull out a little clip, and then I can undo the castellated nut, and then I'll use a little tool to pop the ball joint out. I have this handy tool which is able to press out the ball joints without damaging the rubber boot, so they can be reused. Sometimes you just get a device which is just a wedge that you hammer in there, but it always bursts the rubber boot below. Then you have to replace that. It's actually hard enough to get just the rubber caps, so you end up doing the whole ball joint. There you go. That's quite easy today. So here's my CV joint, and you can see where the grease is escaping. You can kind of hear it there. So that's the hole, that's what failed it, and that's what I'll have to, so we're just going to replace this. First thing I need to do is release this old clip and get the old boot off, so I can get inside the joint and release it from the end of the shaft. There's a little split pin that holds it, or a circlip that holds it. There's a big one and then a little one at the back. Slide that back out of the way, and you can actually see the ball joints and the way it works. So there'll be a little clip inside there, and I just have to separate that apart, pull it off. I'll show you when I have it off the car. I've got fresh grease to put in this, so I'll clean this up so I can see what I'm doing. That peaked cap wasn't working for me anyway. So there's a little split pin in here, and I'm just cleaning out a little bit of the grease from it. Should be able to see that. You can see those splines there. There's a ring groove cut into them all the way around, inside in here, and the clip is holding onto that and holding onto this here. So if I can spread it apart, the right sized screwdriver, bigger one than that, then I should be able to tap this off. And then it just pulls off. Very happy with that. You do have to have a certain sympathy for how hard you're hitting that, You don't want to do any harm. So you're making sure you're not hitting this light casing here, but you're hitting this solid piece of steel on the back of the inner, I think it's called a rose. So you can see roughly how this works. The drive shaft is slotted in there. The balls are held by the shape of this, in these grooves which run in and out that way. So the balls can only go in and out, but that allows this whole cage to go in and out that way, and that this can tilt in any sort of a way. But when it comes to turning in the rotation of the wheels, they hit against the sides of the groove they're in and the whole thing turns. It's very clever. So what I need to do, basically, pull that off. I'm going to clean this up as much as I can, get rid of all the old grease. And then I just put on my new boot, slide this on, and a couple of new clips, then put everything back together again. I've cleaned this out a bit, and you can see now the little clip that I was spreading out, that was locking into this groove on the shaft there. Got my nice new boot here. So can slide that straight onto the shaft. There you go. And a pack of grease in here. So can cut that across the end here. Squeeze it all in here. You need to work it in around all these balls, these bearings. Work it in everywhere. That's what will make this last. Push that boot back. You should be able to just slide this on now. A few gentle taps. There we go. It's locked in place now by that clip I was showing you. I'll slide this back there. It sits over like that. So you're making sure that this groove here in the rubber, where the clip holds it, is slotting into the groove on this casing and on the shaft back here. So inside in the pack are a couple of these ring clips. They clip into themselves there at that. And then just give that a squeeze and it pinches it and it'll hold it tight. Don't have the correct tool for that, so I'll probably do something quite horrible to it right now. You know, I'm no expert at this, I'm just an amateur mechanic. If you have better ways of doing things and you see them, please feel free to comment and share your methods in the comments below. I might learn something, or somebody else watching might. So feel free to give advice in the comments below. Like, what you want to do is make sure all three of those are gripping. So that's located right. And then I'm going to use the vice grips. I'm sure there's a nice tool for this. I don't have one.
That looks quite acceptable. That one not going. Lovely. And it's the same on the inside here. And that's tight. Excellent. So that's one of my boots replaced. I need to slot that back in here, which is, this car has a damper on the steering to make it more steady, but it does make it quite heavy. So with these castellated nuts, just tighten them up a reasonable amount, and then it's the split pin that stops them from turning. And this car still has a very original looking clip. This will have to be tightened with the wheel back on and the car on the ground, then raised again, wheel off, and then put in the split pin. But that's just the best way to do it. It's just the shape of the insides of these alloy wheels. On some of the old Steelies there might have actually been just enough space to get the pin in when it was on the ground. It'd be handy. I'll repeat the process on the far side, and then we'll do that final tightening with it on the ground on the two wheels at the same time. Otherwise we'll be up and down another couple of times, so that'll be ridiculous. I've repeated the same job on the far side and put the wheels both back on and put George back on the ground. I'm now going to tighten up this centre hub nut, and doing this for video, I'm going to do this with torque wrench. I've never done this before because I've always just done these up tight and I've never had a problem, but let's both figure out what the right way to do it is. I've checked the book and it's 74 pounds per foot for the first stage. This is done in 3 stages. You go to the click, then you're supposed to slacken it off, and then you just go to 15 pounds. I'm afraid these are the measurements that my book has. They're a little bit old fashioned. That's 15 pounds. And now we turn it through 90 degrees. This is the squeeze. So that's almost exactly vertical, so if I turn this from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, we'll go 90 degrees. And hopefully we're lining up. George jacked up again and the wheel removed. I can put this split pin through the hole . So that nut simply can't loosen now, and I'll put the wheel back on, put George back on there, and hopefully it'll be good for the test.